Hello everyone. Thank you very much for joining us today at the Birmingham Architectural Association's event on Reuse for Change. My name is Georgina Holden and I am from the Birmingham Architectural Association. Tonight I'm joined by my co-host Matt Redding, Connor Nolan, Katie Miller, and our guest speaker, Faye Thorley. The BAA is supported by a number of partners and sponsors. Thanks to these organisations, we are able to deliver a huge programme of events and activities all year round. So I'd just like to say thank you to Alan Muir, Ibstock, Marley, Delta Lights, FRA, Taylor Maxwell, Allgood, Armature Shanks, Milliken, Kitchen Gallery, Outro and Rainers. We're very lucky to have such great supporters. It's because of our Birmingham Architecture supporters that we have been able to continue to deliver such a varied programme of events and donate thousands to the Architects Benevolent Society. So this talk came about through discussions from our last speaker, Jackie Homan, where we were curious about inventories across the UK for reuse items and natural resources. So myself, Matt and Katie started speaking to Rota DC, who are a well-known company currently carrying this out in Europe. And the BAA approached them to discuss reuse in the built environment. Rota DC pointed us in the direction of a UK-based resource company called Salvo, when we made contact with Faye Thorley. We felt that the BAA lecture series would be a great platform to discuss and promote the great work that they are doing across the UK and beyond to promote future reuse in all construction projects. So a bit about Faye. Faye Thorley is a designer and a pilot project coordinator with comprehensive knowledge and experience in sustainable design, architectural salvage and the circular economy in the built environment. Appointed by Salvo in 2019, Faye is a reuse consultant and the UK pilot project manager for the Interreg Northwestern European FCRBE project, just rolls off the tongue, which stands for Facilitating the Circulation of Reclaimed Building Elements. The project aims to increase the amount of reclaimed building materials being circulated on its territory by 50% by 2032. 2032. Faye's ongoing work with Salvo provides solutions on how to approach reuse and respond appropriately to the challenges of material waste in the construction industry. So any questions that you do have, please write them in the chat and Faye will answer them with the rest of the Salvo team after the presentation, because we've also got quite a few questions already for her. So I'm going to introduce Faye and then hand over to her.
Hi there.
Hi, Faye. I was like, 2013, is that right?
2032, yes.
I know.
Oh dear, wherever the year's going.
I know. I'll hand it over to you, Faye.
Okay, thank you. So I'm just going to share my screen with you. So let me know if there's any problems with this, and let me just get this into presentation mode. Full screen. So can you see that okay?
Yeah, that's perfect.
Okay, lovely. Rightio. Okay, well, thank you very much for the introduction, Georgie, and thank you very much for having me today. It's just been really interesting to see the response that we've had through the project and the really positive engagement that we've had with various architects around the UK. So as you've mentioned, I'll be breaking the presentation into a few parts really. We'll discuss around the FCRBE project and also linking that into the work that the ongoing work that Salvo is involved with. So just a bit of an overview around the project. These are various partners that are involved, including Bellostock and Rotor, University in Brighton, which are probably some outlets that you already know of. So Salvo has actually rebranded the FCRBE project as Future Use. Everyone loves an acronym, however, it is a little bit of a mouthful. So once the project is complete by sort of next year, October next year, in terms of reporting, Salvo is going to continue future reuse and working with other construction stakeholders. So we'll carry that kind of that brand on really. So as As you sort of already mentioned, the project aims to increase the amount of reuse of the building materials in the construction industry by 50% by 2032. And that's only because 1% of construction materials are reused following their first application. When we say 50%, some people do get a little bit confused. I think that's a really ambitious sort of percentage to aim towards. We actually say by 50%, you're increasing by 2%, which means that you're still using double the national average. We have been working with the likes of the GLA, the Greater London Authority, who have set the kind of scope to work towards a 20% increase within their kind of net zero sort of targets. Just a small quote here from Salvo, that the built environment is responsible for 45% of the UK's total carbon emissions and accounts for 60% of materials used whilst creating a third of all waste. So very, very significant. So there has been a little bit confusion around reuse and recycling. So just to kind of define both areas, reuse refers to a practice consisting of using existing construction materials rather than disposing of them as waste and using new products to replace them. Reuse is distinctive from recycling, where the latter involves physical or chemical operations to return materials to their raw material state, whereas the former keeps an existing element in the same state. Okay, so there's various deliverables under the Future Use project, which a lot of architects will be able to tap into. There's an online directory that richly documents more than 1,500 specialised reclaim dealers across Europe. There's a pre-demolition toolkit assisting clients who want to know how to deconstruct rather than to demolish buildings and reuse this material in new construction projects. We're running 20 pilot projects across the UK, Northern France, Belgium, and where these tools will be promoted and tested on large construction sites. So 4 of the projects, 4 out of the 20 projects will be based in the UK. And we've also got the School of Deconstruction through the University of Brighton, which has had sort of slight impacts due to the kind of current climate at the moment with the COVID. However, we are working around ways to kind of digitise this construction and tap into educational institutes within the UK and across the northwest of Europe. And there's also much more going on in the project. So just to give you a little bit of insight into the architectural salvage trades. So the project will also tackle the stagnation and decline of recirculated goods in the construction sector in northwest Europe, and that's by addressing 3 areas. So there's also the limited visibility of architectural salvage operators, which specialise in the reclamation and supply of reusable building elements. There's their limited access into important building projects, and also the challenges of integrating of reused components into contemporary building practices. So the salvage trade is a very, very vibrant trade, but it is generally overlooked by construction professionals as a really resourceful place for materials. And also trust between sort of the architectural designers and developers, and also the trade, just to kind of get those lines of communication open and to kind of get them working in a more kind of harmonious way. Okay, so the chain of actors, which we generally focus on, as you'll all probably be aware, we've got the building owners and the clients, the architects, the local authorities, the demolition companies, developers, and the reclamation dealers. And these are all the chain of actors within this, this process. And it's really great for all these actors to really communicate and to work together to achieve, quite significant or positive results in terms of reuse. So in terms of the pilot projects that we're running, we're kind of looking into various criteria. So for example, it will benefit a private or public player, large or small, who would be willing to take up the subject, but who would not necessarily have the skills or means to do so. There's a construction stakeholder who's interested in the subject but not sure how to go about it. A project which is economically viable and repeatable, nothing too complex. I know that some stakeholders have been very ambitious in terms of what they're wanting to do, but we're sometimes trying to rein them in a little bit and just say, you know, it's better to kind of look at more of an easier or viable option with reuse, just to kind of make that more sustainable. A project which introduces a variety of situations and must face a challenge regarding the extraction or integration of reclaimed products. So the challenge can be related to administrative, organisational or technical matters. So some of our partners are very much looking into working with stakeholders through the kind of procurement and sort of tendering processes of their projects. We have other stakeholders who simply have that kind of reuse strategy in place, but they just don't know the platforms to access to get these building materials. We're also working with stakeholders in construction wishing to apply sustainable and circular principles to their business to reduce their carbon footprint, and they require professional support to fulfil this. Okay, so we've just got one example here of one of the pilot projects in the UK, which sort of hones in on traditional reuse. So this is actually a public project, which is through Manchester City Council. So the areas of reuse we're looking at are the extraction and the same site of materials. So we've basically got the stakeholder to test the auditing sort of techniques or tools that we've developed, and just to kind of quantify the amount of reuse within that project. So this project is actually through Lendlease, and obviously a large scale developer. So they're wanting to use future use as a test bed for other Lendlease projects. So they're really, really keen to implement more reuse strategies or material circularity within their projects. One big issue with this project was contractor resistance and timing. So it's been quite interesting to go into this project with kind of an open mind, but also working with quite a multitude of different actors within this project, and to educate them a little bit more. With the lower picture, sorry, the bottom right hand side, these cobbles were just going to go to landfill, but we actually assigned a salvage dealer to the project who is willing to set up haulage, do everything, arrange haulage to come along to remove all of those cobbles and actually pay Lendlease, you know, a fee for the actual material as well. So, you know, it's good that they were looking and reviewing these buildings as material banks to sort of see that actually there is sort of a bit of monetary gain from reusing. Just on the other side there on the bottom left, there's certain amounts of structural steel that they want to reuse within the project. So again, we've assigned a steel specialist to them, just to kind of look at or explore other avenues to extract that steel and use within the project, other areas of the project. Okay, so here are a few more examples of pilot projects that we're working on. These probably would be more relative to some certain projects that majority of architects are working on in terms of new builds, and also the integration of building materials. So with future use, we're looking at extraction as well as integration, and that's where we are testing the pilots and the tools sort of developed to accommodate for these. So the top left, that's actually a new build. So areas of reuse to maybe explore is the facade cladding, looking at internal insulation. We've got the polycarbonate sort of tongue and groove, which is quite a popular sort of building material at the moment, or cladding system at the moment. So we're looking at various second-hand sources for that. Internal stairs, they actually specified a goods lift, however we found that that's raised too many health and safety issues. And also looking at the internal light fittings, including industrial suspended tube light fittings. So that's just one example. There's a code docs community by PUP Architects. Again, we're looking at the integration of reclaimed materials for that project too, exploring second-hand material options such as the windows, reuse alternative to the corrugated metal cladding. There's structural timber inside, and then the roof material too. So reuse ambition is likely to alter the design aesthetic slightly, And their clients quite happy with that too, not being too sort of restricted in terms of, you know, we want to have it as a certain colour and we want it to have a certain certain colour sort of characteristics. So they're willing to go with a bit more of an open mind and a little bit more flexibility around that. On the bottom there, bottom right, we have the a small exemplar project through quite a high profile architect in London. He's wanting to use his personal home as an exemplar project for reuse. That will integrate same site reuse using bricks already from that demolition project, which can be reintegrated into the project. Looking at concrete slab roof lights, internal, external insulation. There's doors, the main staircase, and also a secondary staircase. And then just on the bottom left-hand side, that's just quite a simple reuse sort of integration project, which is 2,500 metre squares of reclaimed bricks, which just use up the exterior sort of skin of the building. Not necessarily will be a structural a structural element, but just uses a windshield. So that's actually going through now with Lighthouse, and that's through with Bark Studio. I just thought I'd pop some more innovative reuse examples, and there is obviously the difference between sort of innovative and traditional reuse. The first project that I've put up with regards to the Lend-Lease project is much more focused on traditional reuse, with it, you know, being a historical building. But these are some certain examples where designers and clients have really wanted to kind of push the boundaries with reuse and have that as a focal kind of or integral part of the project. So we've got Len Dager Architects, who are quite the advocates for reuse, and there's a couple of projects there with regards to Resource Rose and Upcycle Studios, who have really sort of captured the imagination of a lot of people. They've used Dinnerson internally, which were offcuts, and they've been able to use that kind of material within quite a large, I say like a large scale development, but it's more so the kind of homogeneous aspect of those designs. When we do design with reuse, you can't always have, you know, pairs of everything, but they've been quite fortunate within this building project to have enough secondhand material to make all the buildings kind of complementary and symmetrical. As Resource Rose, which uses a series of bricks which have just had a grinder taken to, so metre square bricks, metre square coverage of bricks, which have then been applied in quite a spontaneous kind of arrangement just to clad the front of those buildings. The European Council building facade, I'll leave that one for now because I've got I'll kind of hone in on that project in a short while. And then we've got Cohen Court, which is by 6A Architects, which used reclaimed timber for the external fabric of their building. More examples, we've also got the Hackbridge project by Bill Dunster Architects, which used 95 tonnes of reused structural steel, and that was for an exemplary project. On the top right there, we've got the reuse of a World War II steel structure, and that's an air hangar which actually was transformed into a bus station in the Netherlands. That's actually, I think that's actually had two, that's been deconstructed and reconstructed twice, and that's its kind of third purpose now. So that's actually using 24 removable steel gantries, and that was manufactured in 1942. So you can know that they had the confidence within that material to be able to reuse it multiple times. The bottom left there is just more of a kind of simple interior fit out. Sometimes, you know, we look at materials and they're not very inspiring. Whereas Rotor have supplied a number of, 119 running meters of just glass partitions, and then that's been repurposed within a new build project in Antwerp. And then the bottom Right, that's actually quite an interesting project, and I've put that project up there because we have been working with a lot of architects who wanting to use brick as their sort of main reuse ambition. There's obviously flags up, certain areas of sort of warranties and compliance, and this DNA house has actually used 50-metre cubes of reclaimed bricks, and they've used those as structural bricks as well, which is quite interesting. So just sort of pop that project up there just to show that it can be done, and it has been done, and it's quite a nice looking building as well. So why should we reuse? So reuse is a very effective way to lower the environmental impact of the construction industry, and that's notably in terms of CO2e production and reduced construction and demolition waste. For those of you that aren't sure about CO2e, that's just the combined greenhouse gases that obviously equate to CO2e, and we're looking at preserving the cultural value of existing building components, and also stimulating interesting local economies. So most salvage dealers and allied businesses such as restorers are SMEs, sustaining local jobs, high skills, and have low impact on the environmental impact. So I've just put a few examples there of Assemble Studio, who you may know, and they actually had their wood supplied to them by Ashwell's Reclamation, which are the two ladies just down there, just at the bottom, who are Deb. So they actually own a reclaimed timber yard down in Essex, and yeah, just very, very wonderful women that are doing pretty spectacular things in terms of the reclamation industry. So a lot of their wood, all of their wood is FSC accredited, so they know the provenance and they can trace back to where the tropical woods come from. So Janine and Deb, there we go, couldn't remember the names then. Okay, so we did a carbon study, Salvo actually did a carbon study, and we continue to do carbon sort of calculations with buildings and looking at the sort of reuse elements within those buildings. So this is just a case study that we worked on with a Manchester business called Roof Slates. And the study found that the reclamation company saved around 250 tonnes of carbon dioxide annually. So just to kind of give you a little bit of an insight, or just for you to compare, the equivalent that would be the equivalent energy needed to build 80 new houses made with reclaimed building materials for walls, floors, and the roof. Alternatively, it would be enough to run 2 indoor civic swimming pools, build 8 new houses with new materials, manufacture 2 large wind turbines, or 50 new electric cars. So they are saving and selling around 2 million reclaimed roof slates a year for the past 25 years. And over the time, the company saved more than 16,000 tonnes of CO2e. And the annual energy saved by the 18 architectural salvage businesses within Greater Manchester is estimated at around 12,000 tonnes of CO2e, according to Salvo. And that's enough to build another 1,500 carbon-free homes every year. And then the UK disposes of around 160 million tonnes of demolition material each year, of which Salvo estimates that less than 1 million tonnes is reclaimed for reuse, and obviously much more can be saved. So I think that just kind of gives you an idea as to you know, how important it is to consider reuse, and the amount of carbon savings that could be, you know, that could be saved within your building project. Okay, so Salvo supporting live projects. So at the moment we are working within the FCRB project, and we're also doing other kind of services around that as well. The FCRB project has just been a really great introduction into the architectural kind of the UK architectural world. So we're kind of growing on this now and starting to work with developers to try and implement more circular strategies within their businesses. So for those of you that aren't really familiar with Salvo, it was established in 1991 to promote the reuse of building materials from demolition, with the ambition of reducing the amount of salvageable materials that end up in landfill. It's a resource that supports reuse by providing demolition alerts, a worldwide directory of salvage-related businesses, and an online marketplace for architectural antiques, reclaimed building materials, and much more. And we also became the UK partner in the FCRB project, which is the 3 projects that we've just been discussing. And in terms of the reuse consultancy that we offer, that's around the reclamation sourcing for our architects, reuse and reclamation CBD programs, reclamation auditing on existing buildings to optimise material circularity. We're looking at carbon calculations and assessments, data collection and the benefits of using reclaimed, and also info about specific reclaimed materials. So looking at the common barriers of reuse, there's generally a lot of lack of education around reclaimed building materials. So we have been working with the likes of the Sheffield School of Architecture just to run certain sessions with their students to try and get them to think more circularity in terms of materials. Obviously, architecture industry is a risk-averse industry, and that's been can be quite challenging sometimes when we're obviously discussing around material warranties and legislation, and whether these materials are safe to implement into your projects. That obviously goes on to the need for material warranties. We've been looking at the ways how we can design less homogeneous. There are certain Roto are quite good at this, as well as there's another company in the UK called what are they called? Vitruvius, who are an architectural design company down in London, and they're paired with a reclamation kind of dealer as well. So they generally look at projects where if you want to, or you only have around sort of 50 metres square of a certain wood, but you need 70, how you can then look to match or to complement, should I say, that wood with maybe a nice stone, rather than having that sort of homogeneous design and those pairs throughout your designs. Looking at policies and regulations, so we are kind of not so much fighting policy, but we are working with local authorities and policymakers to see how we can work around any issues and to try and advocate reuse a lot better. Lack of collaboration between the key actors and the access to supplier platforms. And we do find that it's really important that all the actors within that chain are working efficiently, and they all have a very similar outlook in terms of reuse and similar objectives, and that would just make the ease of transaction between materials a lot easier. We've got the slow reactivity to demolition jobs, and generally when we do find out about demolition jobs, you're only allowed a day or 2 to go in to audit those buildings, and it's almost a case sometimes where you have to just go in and sort of cherry pick what you want, and then obviously, you know, the rest will be demolished and sent to landfill, rather than fed back into the trade and resold or reused, or, you know, implemented into various same site reuse, or held within the same company, and have that kind of intersynergy between materials and the different building projects that are set within that company. Storage facilities can sometimes be a problem, especially for smaller architectural studios. However, a lot of suppliers, the reclamation dealers, are happy to hold stock for you. Sometimes that might come with a small storage fee. However, in my experience with the pilot projects, a lot of the trade are they have huge yards, they have a lot of space, and they're happy to store that material for you until you're ready to collect. A shift in the 20th century design ethics and also actors not having a common goal. So a lot of these projects generally are successful when they are client-led. Once you've got your client on board, or if that's your client's sort of ambition is to really kind of harness reuse, then generally these projects are more successful. Okay, so material sources. So we're looking at ways to access materials. So the construction, we've got the reclamation market. So construction products applied to by professional companies specialised in this trade. These can be found on obviously Salvo directory, and there's other similar directories such as Aparlis, who will also be able to provide an overview of different reclamation dealers, and just to see what's been sold out there at what time. So this can all be accessible to you. Same site as the new project. So this is where construction products are dismantled from the building that undergo transformation and reused in the new project. And this is the case of same site reuse or in situ reuse. And then also looking at other demolition sites. So construction projects are dismantled from a building undergoing demolition and transferred to a new project where they are reinstalled. And this option usually aims to minimise any necessary storage and transport. And we generally like this this type of source just because of the amount of carbon savings as well. Okay, so same site reuse. We have the benefits and the challenges. The pictures there, Segro project in Slough, and that was the moving of 3.30 metre squares of steel structure from one site to another. So the benefits of this type of reuse is there's no need to purchase materials. It obviously saves on transport costs. You preserve the heritage of the building, and this can lead to overall cost savings. So the challenges, we're obviously starting the project with uncertainties. Logistics have to be well planned, and then communication is key throughout the project. And sometimes contractors unfamiliar with the reuse process can lead to overpriced bids. Site-to-site reuse. So the demolition works on one site can foster the development of a project to another site. So this is generally when a stakeholder generally manages large property portfolios. Building owners can foster the exchange of materials and products between the sites in their possession. The architect or associated expert can scout for opportunities in local, ongoing or soon to begin demolition works. The contractor also has access to many opportunities via other construction or demolition sites, their own networks or their warehouse of reclaimed products. So the benefits and the challenges of this, their approach entails the same kind of benefits and challenges of same site reuse. So it relies on coincidental match between supply, so a batch of material becoming free on a certain site, and demand, which is a different project in which a material can be reused. So the window of opportunity is often very small, from a few days to a few weeks, again requiring quite rapid reaction times. Specifiers involved in the project development need to carefully plan the logistics of this operation. So again, looking at short-term storage and transport, and it's always recommended to have reclamation specialists involved in such an operation, and that's to check the product suitability and the correct delivery correct delivery conditions. So again, this is the project which I showed you earlier on in the terms of the European Council building facade. It's a very, very impressive building with a very ambitious reuse sort of goal. And just to the left-hand side, you can see at the bottom, that's one of the Belgian salvage dealers displaying some of the many windows sourced across Europe. So within that project, all the key actors were very much on board, and all those windows were sourced across Europe, and they work with many reclamation dealers to try and get that sheer quantity of material to integrate within that building project. But you can just see there that the it's a very ambitious project, and in terms of supply, it can be achieved. So designing with reuse, clearly advertise your reuse ambitions. Outline incentives driving your ambition. To familiarise yourself with the reclamation trade and also material specialists that can support you in these kind of processes. Get a reuse strategy in place as soon as possible, as this may require support through the trade, or again using a reuse specialist. Exploring alternative sources of reclaimed building elements through early research. I think being flexible is really, really important, and also anticipating future dismantling. So again, it's kind of future-proofing those materials and making sure that you're not using, for example, very over-engineered mortars, and just obviously reducing the reuse capacity for that material. Okay, so recommendations to the tenderers on proposing reuse. So when you're working with the authority, it's important to highlight the positive impacts of integrating reclaimed materials. Propose to retain and refurbish existing built structures. Assess the reuse potential of the materials present in the existing building. Propose to integrate reclaimed materials in the new project. And also point out to the commissioners what kinds of support and funds are available if they engage in circular strategies. When you're working with the client, generally you find that, like I said before, a lot of more successful projects are very much client-led. The client has a really a strong sort of reuse sort of strategy in place, or they really want to harness that within the project. If that's not the case, you need to show that you've planned backups and alternative solutions to mitigate the risk of not finding a reclaimed construction product that you propose. Budget reuse strategies as precisely as possible, and don't forget to consider extra work that may require, such as cleaning, etc. Consider teaming and get with experts, and again, we'd all recommend to do that very, very early on in the project, just to kind of iron out all the creases prior, and to have a very concise kind of plan in place, and to develop scenario-based proposals to frame the range of possible outcomes. And projects, like I've just mentioned, whose clients advocate and drive reuse often accomplish their reuse ambition. We've just sort of uploaded a few diagrams just regards to the design, so the brief design and building. You very kind of similar in terms of the processes that you guys are all very used to working to under the RIBA kind of programming of works. So again, it's just defining a reuse target, how the stages of kind of procurement and when that comes into play. Again, we've just got another sort of diagram there which outlines the various stages of your ambition, from the brief design and also the building. So I think this presentation will also be available on the BAA website, so you'll be able to have a look at these diagrams, and always get in touch if you have any questions. Okay, so identifying the reuse potential. In principle, most building materials and products are able to be reused. In practice, the reuse of certain materials is easier and more common than others. We've just given you an overview of common materials. I shan't read them all out, but the likes of bricks, tiles, timber, flagstones, window frames, doors, parquet floors, that sort of thing, they're generally much more common where you'll find in the trade. And I guess people see more value in those sometimes. The less common materials are more so the prefabricated concrete facade elements, precast floor slabs, modular partitions, and I guess certain materials that don't aesthetically or have that nice aesthetics to them generally get overlooked, and that's not to say that they don't have a reuse sort of capability. Okay, identifying reuse potential. So conducting a pre-demolition reclamation audit and material inventory of existing buildings will assist with possible reuse outcomes. So we're looking at the kind of cost impact, the timings, managing uncertainty, coupling reuse strategy with a waste management plan, surveying and sourcing interesting batches of reclaimed building products, purchasing and collecting building elements from a diverse source prior to or parallel to the works, undertaking complementary research to assess the reuse potential of specific building products and realising performance tests, and also integrating the inventory of available reclaimed building materials in a BIM model, and assign a reuse expert to carry out specific auditing and assignment tasks. And then just to conclude, so I know that time's kind of pressing now. So looking at maximising, maximising the integration of reclaimed building materials in new buildings should be an important objective for the construction industry. Designing with reuse requires a lot of flexibility. Reuse can represent an opportunity to rethink the role and leverage of architects within the contemporary building materials economy. Your reuse strategy should be expressed as early as possible in the development process. Try not to be too overambitious. A little reuse is better than no reuse at all. It is possible to combine all three reuse approaches in the same project, and Salvo can obviously support this. If well planned, even the construction phase can present interesting reuse opportunities, especially when working with enthusiastic and well-informed contractors. Buildings should be viewed as material banks. And again, we're looking at we don't like to kind of mention the monetary kind of gains too much through reuse, but it's always good to bear that in mind. And no procurement route prevents reuse, while some of them actively facilitate it. So do not hesitate to opt for a procurement strategy tailored to your reuse strategy. And that is it.
Thank you so much, Faye. That was awesome.
So there's quite a lot to get through. I'm sorry.
No, that was great. That was great. Thank you.
It's a big subject, isn't it, really?
Yeah.
It is a huge subject, yeah. And yeah, again, and it differs. I've noticed with our partners in other countries, it's quite interesting to see how they how successful they are with this. I know in Belgium, reuse is very much on the agenda for the more sort of centralised and sort of with the local authorities. So they generally get a lot more traction through that and a lot more support as well. So generally a lot more sort of a lot more support, and I think it generally makes it easier for reuse to be applied into sort of public as well as private projects.
No, great. And we've had a few questions, Faye. I don't think we're going to be able to get through all of them, but if we ask a few, then
Okay.
see how we go. So one of the questions we had was when it comes to, I think you kind of mentioned it a little bit at the end there, but when it comes to net zero carbon goals, what are the quick wins? What are the potential blind spots?
Yeah, I'm just going to stop sharing my screen for a second.
No worries.
There we go. And then let's just see what we've got. So
It's come prepared.
I have. Okie dokie. Right. So yeah, you send me through. So yeah, in terms of, did you mean in terms of quick wins? So for the higher carbon value, or are you referring to the more sort of broader spectrum of reuse? So for example,
for the broader spectrum.
Yeah, so I think first and foremost, we'd rather explore the kind of possibility of not demolishing a building at all and to refurbish. However, if this isn't an option, we'd rather assess same-site reuse as an effective way to save carbon and reduce the kind of transportation of materials. For stakeholders such as large-scale developers with multiple sites and sometimes those with greater storage capacity, they can treat these buildings as material banks and allow for site synergy and have greater capacity to like track material flow and gather data on those materials. And that's a really important aspect for material provenance, and it makes the sort of reintegration of materials much easier because the actors involved know where those, the background of those materials, and sort of almost can know that they're safe to use.
Yeah, interesting.
Yeah, that's probably
great. No, that's great.
I suppose that goes on to the kind of Retrofirst REBA initiative, doesn't it, as well?
Yeah, for sure.
Because that's quite hot at the moment. I'm getting a lot of emails saying, can you email your MP and let them know about this initiative? So it kind of sits hand in hand really with reuse in a sense.
Yeah, they do, for sure. And also looking at, I was being keen to see how local authorities can, for social housing as well, and how reuse can be really sort of integrated within these sort of types of builds, really, in these projects. And to try and kind of marry those up, especially with regards to like the retrofitting that's going on now.
Because like you mentioned, it's an avenue that's not really being used as well as it could be, really, especially for those types of projects. There's plenty of material out there, really.
Yeah, that's it, and not to have that kind of obviously we are risk averse, but to understand those materials, to meet suppliers and to do a lot of research, and to test, have those testings or capacity to test if it is a problem that you're not sure whether to integrate a certain material. I think it's it's knowing what avenues and what capacities out there to support those decisions, really.
Yeah. So another one of the questions was, if there was one material you could ban as it has no reuse capability, what would it be?
It's a very subjective question. I know I'm going to open that out to the team tomorrow, and also the project partners. I guess one would argue most materials have a reuse capacity. The inefficient production of cement would be one, I guess. It makes up, I think it's around 12% of the footprint in the UK construction industry, and produces around like over 2 billion tons per year of kind of the greenhouse kind of greenhouse gases. It's just terrible. But in terms of more of personally, I find that the small brick slip cladding solutions can be quite frustrating, and it's particularly those which have been made to look like aged, and they are generally kind of secured with very over-engineered mortars, and that can sometimes make them quite impossible to kind of disassemble and reuse.
That's really interesting.
What about you?
Oh, it is a tricky one. I think for me it's more PIR insulation.
Yeah.
I have a real bugbear with that. I mean, granted, there are certain applications where it's very good, but for the majority of it, I find it's overused, and once it's able to be removed from a building, it's normally crushed by them just putting it to one side, or and then putting something heavy on it, and then obviously that just forces all the micro bubbles out of it, so it's basically just a lump of plastic, and it's lost all its quality. So yeah, that would be my one, definitely.
That's a good one.
Well done, Matt.
So one of the other ones, I think we'll ask just maybe two more, was are there any local authorities or public sectors that are behind this, or is it purely a private sector, and which sector is best, e.g. like housing or industrial or commercial?
Yeah, so the Brighton and Hove City Council, they very much advocate reuse, and we have been working with them in line with the School of Deconstruction with the University of Brighton. And that was to allow us to have access onto building sites and actually slow down demolition. And that will allow us time to go in, assess the building fabric, and just extract as much material as we possibly can. And so yeah, they are probably one of the most progressive sort of local authorities within the UK at the moment. Private domestic projects are quite prevalent, and that's obviously with clients who have a high reuse ambition. But also seeing public and private commercial realising the value of reuse and sort of having those conversations very early on.
That's
With this to
interesting.
kind of establish future dates, which can be kind of audited and implement reuse in one way or another. So again, we just spoke about Lendlease, who we're kind of currently working with, and I've had conversations with them now around other different sites in Birmingham and London, where we can start to kind of have these kind of ideas and start to look in what materials could be reused either as same site or within other projects within that company. As I said, I still feel that the UK is still lacking behind our partner countries, who do have more of a wholesome backing with their local authorities, and also implementation of like scrutiny at planning. So projects that which haven't considered reuse are less likely to be accepted, which is really interesting.
No, definitely.
Yeah, I think I said that to you, Faye, actually. It seems like in Europe especially, they seem to be just selling it in a better way. Everybody, even like Rota DC on their Instagram, it's just really sexy images. It's just lovely. It just doesn't seem like it's something that clients probably understand that is possible, that you can just reuse materials. And as well, the point that you made earlier about demolition and having little time to go onto sites. I suppose as well, as an architect, I suppose I didn't even really realise that you obviously need the time to go on there, go for an inventory, audit everything, and you'd need to kind of factor that into a programme really if you were brought on board to look over a project and understand what to use. But in terms of demolition times, how long do you get? Is it literally like a week, or is it?
Sometimes just a couple of days. Yeah, you literally have to go in, do as much as you can. And I was speaking to one supplier actually who really, he kind of defined it quite nicely in terms of the cherry and the cream on top of a cake, where you go in, you just take all the nice stuff, and then you have to get back out. Also in terms of having to kind of incentivize the contractors too. So, you know, in times you have to give them quite a lot of money just to allow access onto that site to extract what you want, which, you know, isn't very fair. So it's again how we can look at other ways of incentivizing demolition building contractors to allow certain stakeholders, or, you know, whether it will be a reclamation kind of consultant or even a trade specialist to go in and work with the architects or the demolition contractors to assess these materials and make sure that, you know, what can't be used within those projects are fed back into the trade effectively.
Yeah, definitely. Well, just before we close, I think a big thank you to Faye. Thank you for speaking with us this afternoon, and thank you, Georgie, for hosting. So thank you very much, guys, and for the team in the background, Connor and Katie as well. So just before we finish, I would like to let you all know about the upcoming BAA events on the 3rd of November. At 5 p.m. we have the Innovation Office. We will be exploring how office space needs to be designed and furnished in a way that allows office workers to access a variety of furniture settings and locations, with innovation playing a central role. On the 11th of November at 5 p.m, join us for part 2 of our Resilience with an Urbanist platform with CJ Obi on how do we attract more Black people into the built environment. And on the 25th of November at 5:30, join us for another Resilience talk with Simon DeGell who is a REBA board member and REBA National Council member, to discuss how they are working to overcome the challenges they face daily. And finally, a bit of a plug. So if there are any students in our discussion today, so we're launching the BA Student Ambassador Program, and is a great opportunity for future architects to gain experience and expand their network beyond the academic education. If you'd like to know more, please check out our website, but deadline for applications is the 30th of this month. And a quick shout out to the Architects Benevolent Society, who have a Christmas quiz which the BAA shall be sponsoring and finishing off 2020 with donations totaling to £7,500. So yeah, please just join us for that. That'd be great. And again, big thank you to everyone for joining us. So I hope to see you at the next one. And thank you, Faye, again for presenting. So thank you all, and see you all next time. Bye-bye.
Thanks all.
Thank you.